Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Now today, if you're a Quebecer, you may soon have to think twice about wearing conspicuous religious symbols. A new proposal have many Canadians fuming. Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback. This show, Malika, it didn't come from our team.
You're right.
It came from outside.
It did. It came from the community.
Excellent.
We got quite a few Canadians who asked us to cover what they called big news. So to get a sense of what that looks like, I have a map on my screen, and these are the people tweeting AJ Stream right now. And this is one of the tweets we got. And this is from Dara, who says, controversy in Canada over Quebec's Charter of Values, potential legal action over breach of Canadian rights. Now, for those of you at home, and thank you very much to Dara for tweeting that, we also want to hear from you. So send us your tweets, your comments, your questions with hashtag AJStream.
But before we jump into today's show, here's a follow-up to a story that we've been tracking here at the stream. Take a look. There's a heated debate going on in Quebec right now over a charter of values being proposed by the PQ party. It has big implications for Canada, as 1/5 of its residents are foreign-born. On Saturday, tens of thousands marched in Montreal to voice their opposition to the charter that would ban public workers from wearing conspicuous religious symbols. The PQ has defended the charter, saying Canada's model of multiculturalism has failed, and it doesn't represent reality on the ground in Quebec. Now, although Canada was the very first country in the world to adopt multiculturalism as an official policy, it has dealt with several ups and downs in its history. So how will this proposed charter affect residents of Quebec? Joining us to discuss the proposed values charter from Montreal, we have Michel Lincourt. He is a member of the Quebec Secular Movement. On Skype, Jack Jedwab of the Association for Canadian Studies. In our Google Plus Hangout, we have journalist Faria Nakvi Mohammed. She is the founder of the blog Canadian Mum A. And also in our Hangout, David Rand, president of the Atheist Free Thinkers. It's great to have all of you in the stream. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's get it started. Hello there. Good afternoon. Hello, everybody.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Hello. Such a polite bunch. They must be Canadians. So, Jack, we're going to start with you. This charter, what is it saying? I don't quite understand what the fuss is about. Can you explain it for me?
Well, the fuss from the standpoint of the government is that it says that it wants to take religion out of the public sphere, but its definition of the public sphere is extremely wide. So that would include, for example, if you're a Jewish doctor wearing a kippah or a female doctor wearing a hijab, you would not be allowed in a hospital to practice your profession. That would include university professors, that would include daycare workers, that would include municipalities, although the municipalities on the island of Montreal, Quebec's largest city, have all said they would like to opt out or be exempted from this, and the government was offering an exemption for certain institutions. So already you're seeing a fragmentation of Quebec on that basis. Really, the fragmentation will be around Montreal, where the largest concentration
of
municipalities
are.
All right.
Michelle?
Can we jump in? Because
I think Jack was doing a great job.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle. You already jumped, so carry on.
Yeah, jump.
Yes, well, the proposal by the government has 5 parts. There is a fairly large consensus on 4 of those 5 parts. And the only place where there is a discussion is about the display of religious, so-called religious symbols in the public service during working hours. And this is where there is a discussion. So let's put things in perspective.
Yeah,
and,
I wouldn't describe it as a discussion exactly. It's actually quite a heated debate.
Can I finish? Shall we discuss about the other 4 parts?
Well, we can start. Go ahead, discuss. I wouldn't take much time on it because the other 4 parts are not very relevant. So
the other 4 parts are relevant.
All right, Jack.
David, go ahead.
Yes,
Come on.
separation of religion and
Go
state
ahead,
is
David.
one of the principles behind this charter, and that's an excellent principle. Neutrality of the state, which includes a measure of restraint and neutrality in the public service, and from that comes the idea that religious symbols, obvious ones, should not be present in the public service.
All right, David.
And it also establishes male-female equality.
Well, all right, gentlemen, if I may just jump in here.
David, Jack, Michelle, Fariha, go ahead.
Essentially on neutrality of state. If you're looking at neutrality of state, it's showing that our Quebec government is valuing neutrality of state over the economy. I mean, we have a debt of over $260 billion. And yet we're placing all of our focus on religious symbols and excluding them from the state. Who's talking about our economy and the economic impact if all of these religious minorities were to up and leave the province?
So I'm going to make a host decision. My host decision is that we have a time limit for all of the things that we can actually discuss. So we're going to focus on the one thing that is actually making news internationally and not just in Canada, but around the world. Malika.
Well, as we just saw, that there are some heated debates on both sides, and it's the same, of course, online, as it usually is. David writes in, I'm totally against these principles I grew up with as a Canadian. QC is transforming it into Putin's Russia in plain sight of the world. So on the one hand, you have someone comparing Quebec to Putin's Russia. On the other hand, you have a Facebook comment from Julianne who says, Quebec just wants to reassure everybody should be treated equally in the public sector. Jack, this person goes on to say, government representatives in a position of authority are neutral. That's all. At 5 p.m. when the job is finished, they can do whatever they want with their own religion. So what do you say to that argument?
Malika, I would love to jump in on that one.
Fariha, we will come to you, but that was posed to Jack, so we do Jack, and then Fariha, you're more than welcome to respond as well. Go ahead.
I say that there's nothing that's not neutral about someone wearing a hijab working in a daycare center, as long as they're not engaging in any proselytism. And there's been no example that they've done that. Same applies to a Jewish doctor wearing a kippah or someone wearing a turban. As long as they're not engaging in any proselytization, there's nothing affecting the neutrality. They're simply wearing something on their head. That's what I would say to that. And there's been actually no complaint previously about any impartiality or neutrality issue. So really, this is, I think, something that's been imagined by a lot of people. And regrettably, it's being proposed as legislation.
Fariha, go ahead.
I agree with Jack. I mean, part of the role of a democracy is not just ensuring the rule of the majority, but also to protect the rights of the minorities. And when you stop doing so, you're starting to slip very quickly into totalitarianism.
Oh, that's ridiculous, totalitarianism. The idea of having a neutral public service is to help protect everyone, majority,
Protect
minority,
them
and
from
everyone.
what?
But this has nothing
Protect
to do with
them from
neutrality.
what?
And by
That's
the
what
way,
I
if you
want to
want a
know.
neutral public
It's to
service,
protect
then,
them from
you should not
bias
allow
in
the wearing of
services.
crosses. And as you know, David, in the Parliament of Quebec, above the Speaker's chair, there's quite a sizable crucifix.
All
I'd
the
like to
people
hear
who
you
support
say
the
more about
charter,
that
all the
and
people
to
who support the
to
charter are in
represent a
favor of
movement
taking that down.
that
Almost
advocates
everybody.
atheism.
Okay, guess I'm going to reset for a moment because I can hear
Can
one
I
of you at the
speak?
moment. Michelle, you can speak, but I'm just going to share with our audience something that's very visual that might help them understand this debate a little better. So we're looking at conspicuous religious symbols, and so on my laptop I've got the proposed sort of breakdown of what is conspicuous and what isn't. So have a look at this. So on this side, symbols that are viewed to be conspicuous, so a large cross, a hijab, we have a turban here, a Jewish skull cap, a larger face covering here, so we're looking at perhaps a burqa. The religious symbols that you can wear, this is again the proposal, small pieces of jewelry, maybe a small cross here, perhaps a ring. So Michelle, how workable is this? Is this actually possible for public workers to actually do this?
Well, they do that already for political symbols. The law says that if you work for the government, you cannot display political signs while you work. So it's the same thing for religious symbols. Because keep in mind that the so-called religious symbols are also political symbols. The proof of that is that recently I had a debate on CBC with a university professor from McGill, and he was wearing a cross to protest the Quebec government proposal. So suddenly his cross became a political symbol. And this is against that we wish to establish this principle,
Michelle,
which is
I
a
would love to
reasonable
respond to that.
principle.
Okay, Jack and David, I hear you muttering. I will come back to you, but look,
No, because
Fariha,
it's just patent nonsense. If I wear a kippah on my head, it's not a political symbol. It doesn't send a message to you. It doesn't tell you how to think or what to do. It's as simple as that. If I wear a T-shirt saying Democratic Party on it, that is sending you a message. So it's quite a different thing to make that very muddled comparison.
All right, let me bring in the community
I would love
into
to jump
this.
in here.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'm going to bring the community in too. Go ahead.
You absolutely cannot equate hijab, the turban, or the kippah to a necklace or earrings. It's just not understanding the importance in their respective religions.
You know, Fariha, it's interesting you mentioned that. We have someone on Facebook, Allison, and she's actually another of the community members who suggested we cover this story. She writes in, the Quebec Charter of Values, it's an obscene strike against all people of faith other than Christians. So I'd actually like, David, I'd like you to pick up on that with this video comment from someone who says something along the same lines. Have a listen.
I believe the separation of religion and government is fundamental to the Canadian identity. However, the Quebec government's proposed charter seems like, rather than a move towards secularization, is making Quebec into a homogenized Christian province. By not removing religious symbols from government buildings like schools, hospitals, or the National Assembly, it makes the charter seem like it's targeting religious minorities. It would also appear the charter is a political move to gain voters in the next election by mobilizing the Quebecois around what is essentially a non-issue.
So David, here's someone who supports secularism but says this feels like it's targeted.
Well, he said something that's false. He said that there are Christian symbols all over the place, but there's only one that's contentious, and that's the one in the National Assembly. Since it's been decades that all kinds of crucifixes and Christian symbols have been removed from public buildings in Quebec. Quebec has been secularizing for decades.
David, do you live in Quebec?
Yes, I do. I live in Montreal.
Okay. Have you ever given directions to somebody and not used the word Saint Jean, Saint Catherine?
I don't care about the names of streets. That's irrelevant.
Well,
the point is that the Christian symbols have been very largely removed. The teachers who were nuns and monks or priests took off their robes and secularized their dress, like we're asking everybody to do now in the public service. All that has happened with people of the Christian faith for decades, and all we're trying to do is make it the same for everyone, where religious symbols, whether they're Christian or Muslim or Sikh or anything else, should be either in the private sphere or they can be in the public sphere outside of state institutions, provincial institutions. This ban on religious symbols applies only to people who work for the public service while they're working. They can put their symbol back on at the end of the day. I happen to be an atheist. I have several atheist T-shirts with symbols and slogans on them. I don't wear them to work, and I don't even work in the public service because I don't think it's appropriate.
You don't understand the importance of a religious symbol. It's not a religious symbol. It's a part of our faith. Now, I wear a hijab.
Well, if it's part of your faith, it's a religious symbol, obviously.
No, it's a part of her identity, is what she's saying.
It's a part of my
In the same way that for
identity.
Michel, presumably, or at least people he knows, the French language is part of his identity. Of course, that's different. It's always different when it's not your identity.
I am going to play our audience a little satirical ad that's come off the back of this entire debate that you've been listening to for the last 15 minutes or so. It is basically poking fun at the Charter of Values. Have a look. It's on my laptop right now.
Chérie, es-tu prête? Ah non. Tu peux pas t'habiller comme ça, on va penser que t'es une musulmane.
Québec laïque?
Bref, ça fait penser à une religion dont on peut pas prononcer le nom. OK? Allez, fais ça vite, tu vas être en retard.
Vécu, des valeurs qui touchent.
So people outside of Quebec are obviously making fun of this discussion, this debate that you're having. What is this doing for the reputation of Quebec, Michel?
Well, there is a disease in English Canada. We call it Quebec bashing. It has been going on for 50 years, and each time the Quebec society introduces something, whether it's a language legislation or the creation of the pension plan organization or what have you, there is all kind of insults thrown at the French Canadian and at the Quebec duly elected government. We
Michel,
are a
would you permit me to
democratic
be a
state.
critic without accusing people of Quebec bashing? I feel very much the same way. I'm critical of this. And by the way, if you read the French press,
Jack, it's incredible, Jack, how you cut people off. Stop talking for a moment. Stop talking for a moment. And
Michel,
let
we're
me
here to have a
finish my
conversation.
sentence.
Michelle, finish
It's
your
very
sentence and then we're
insulting
going to
what
push
you
on.
do. Jack, it's very insulting what you keep doing.
Okay,
It's very insulting what you keep doing. So stop for a moment.
Let's everybody finish your sentence. So let's start with Michelle. Finish your sentence. Go ahead.
My sentence is that over the years, for 300, my family has been here for 350 years. We built this country. And over the years, we welcome, thousands of immigrants. We gave our lives in wars. We peacekeeping missions, we invented the thing.
So Michelle, what's your point? What was the point?
We are very, very tolerant society.
Okay, very tolerant society.
And to say otherwise is simply not true.
The kippah or the turban.
Jack, go ahead.
Could I throw in something?
Jack was going to finish his sentence. He waited for Michelle. Then we can open it up more. Go ahead, Jack.
I just want to say that I agree with Michelle that there's a great deal of Quebec bashing going on in this debate. I'm really very upset with the low level of criticism coming from English Canada and the English Canadian media. Quebecers are not xenophobic. Quebecers are not racist any more than any other part of Canada. There's racism everywhere, but this controversy is not about race. It's about religion, and it's about keeping the state separate from religion, and that's what it's about. And the media in English Canada seems incapable of addressing that question without mixing it up with insults about people being intolerant and racist.
Well, obviously, David, you're either not reading the French press either, and I don't think Michelle is either carefully reading the French press, because if you read one of the mainstream papers, La Presse, you'll find the vast majority of columnists, almost unanimous with the exception of one, have denounced this in very similar terms to the way it's being denounced in the rest of Canada. It's not by wrapping oneself in the Quebec flag and saying, they're bashing us, and that's what it's really about, and trying to, by virtue of that, mobilize Quebec public opinion to support this, that I think you're going to gain ground. You need to get solid arguments.
All right,
to do that.
Let me just make a little bit of space.
I love my province. I love my province. I love Quebec, and my family has contributed to Quebec too, by the way, for many, many decades, many, many years, along with many other Quebecers from many communities across Quebec. I'm not going to be taught lessons or preached to by somebody saying, I come here, I've been here 300 years. I haven't been here 300 years, my family hasn't, but I love this place and I hate to see what's happening to it by virtue of a group of people who are ready to violate fundamental rights, something we've not talked about. This thing would not pass any rights test in our charter, in the Canadian Charter, any international convention. There's nothing, we'd be the only jurisdiction on the planet that would bar a Jewish doctor from wearing a kippah in a hospital.
David, we take your point. Everybody just reset for a moment, take a breath. Malika, you continue to speak. Go ahead.
Some of that same passion that Jack was just speaking with, I'm seeing it online. There's a point that Fariha, you mentioned that our community is picking up on it, and basically to sum up what you said is that the scarf is just as central to your identity as French may be to some Quebecois. So on Twitter, Zahira says, in trying to preserve a French Quebecois identity, they feel is under threat. They're not open to embracing the difference. So Michel, of course, I want to pose this to you. Here's another one from Benjamin. He says, too often it seems Quebec's historically justified anxieties about the loss of his culture to English Canadian interests have manifested themselves through a xenophobic rejection of all other cultures. Michel?
I don't understand what you're saying.
He
says not anxious. We are very comfortable with our culture, and we're thrown at it that we are going against rights. I'm not so sure that displaying your religious symbols in the public service is a right.
Displaying wearing a kippah in a hospital is a right.
I'm sorry, I got to jump in.
You hear a lot of people disagreeing with you, so I think that might be your answer right there. Go ahead, Faria.
Again, I cannot finish my sentence.
Well, Michel, you can't say something like a religious symbol is not a right. I'd like to introduce the notion of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. Quebec is a part of Canada.
As Guy Rocher said, Guy Rocher is a very famous sociologist in Quebec. And he said something very interesting on the radio 2 days ago. He said that with your religious choice come consequences. And if you choose to become a priest, for instance, in the Catholic Church, you choose the consequence, you accept the consequence of not marrying, you see. If you choose to wear your hijab, then you must accept the consequence of not working for the government.
Absolutely not.
No,
Absolutely
you
not.
don't have to
I
accept
will
that
cut you
consequence
off.
unless you're willing to violate the rights of that particular individual.
Michel is right. Michel is right.
No, it's an
The
opinion,
believers are
David. He's
responsible
not
for
right.
their
It's an opinion,
choices.
David.
There's no way.
I'm
Putting
offering an
time
opinion
on
too.
this
However, in
conversation
terms
for
of
the
the
time being. So, Michelle, David, Jack, and Fariha, only because I want to hear every word you're saying, and right now I'm just hearing a quartet, which is amazing. But I want to give the last word for this part of the conversation with Fariha. Just very quickly, what is the atmosphere like in Quebec right now for you as a hijabi?
As a hijab married woman, I'm so proud to represent my faith and to observe my faith in my hometown. This is where I was born. This is where I've lived the majority of my life. And right now I'm seeing friends, I'm seeing family being racially discriminated against, being yelled at by people serving them. And that saddens me because I love this province. I love this country. And this atmosphere of fear and hatred is unacceptable to me.
Right. Okay. To be continued. Do I even need to say that? We are going to take all of those guests, all of that passion and the debate to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. But before we do that, here's Malika with some other stories that we're following.
For our leads today, we turn to Pakistan, where a branch of Lahore Grammar School is facing scrutiny for its curriculum. Parents are angry because the girls' school has introduced a class on comparative religion in addition to their standard Islamic studies. The worries are now going national. Popular Pakistani TV host Mubashir Luqman featured disgruntled parents on his show to air their complaints. Well, in this segment that I'm playing on my screen, Luqman said the school was replacing compulsory Islamic studies with a course in comparative religion. After the segment aired, the school's principal took to Facebook to correct misconceptions. The principal says the class is not merely comparing religions. We aim to educate about Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism and their fundamental teachings. The principal explained that Islamic studies classes are still a compulsory part of the curriculum, but the message sparked even more debate. Hashir writes, schools are for secular education. Religion can be taught in homes. And Syra comments, Islam does not condemn learning about other religions. This is the height of intolerance. The controversy has quickly spread outside the school's halls, with the Pakistani website posting this image online. A Lahore school's anti-Islam activities exposed. Immediate action must be taken against the shameful activities of this school. But some are disappointed that this has caused such controversy. Rafia commented, so thanks to Mubashir Luqman, our school is now openly exposed to threats. I wonder where these lies will take the country. Well, are you following this story? Tweet us your thoughts using hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Malika, how do you manage when we've got a debate like this where there's a lot of passion in it and we've got a lot of people tweeting in and adding to the conversation online? What's your strategy?
Well, online there's just as much passion, and so they're trying to make their voices heard just as much.
Read my tweet, Malika, read my
demanding.
tweet. Excellent. So we have a post show coming up, but I am actually, nothing to do with today's debate. I'm taking a couple of days off next week.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Look at Malika, she's almost looking sad right now.
I really am sorry to hear that.
The reason she's not totally looking sad is though, because when I'm away, Malika is going to be hosting.
I am.
What's the plan? What are you up to?
I'm just scooching over a little bit.
Yeah. So the last time I went away on vacation, I came back and there was a whole new desk.
There was.
What's going to happen next week?
Minor changes, but you'll have to wait and see.
All right, so I am officially handing over the show to you.
Thank you very much. Well, on Monday's show, are Iran's hardline policies starting to ease under President Hassan Rouhani? We'll discuss why Iranian authorities unexpectedly freed 11 prominent political prisoners. But stay with us. The post show on Quebec is next at stream.aljazeera.com, and Femi and I will see you online.
Hello again, this is the Streams Online post show. We are still discussing the Parti Québécois Charter of Values. We're going to get right back to the conversation. Really, I bet right now people are either searching for Quebec Charter of Values or the PQ party as well. Say, I need to get more information on this. This is heating it. David, I want to show you something that I actually found on the Huffington Post. It is on a bus in Montreal, and the lady is wearing a headscarf. She's obviously a Muslim, and there's a gentleman here who's he's harassing her for the whole bus ride that she's on, yelling things out. I'm actually having to move past the point in the conversation where he's swearing at her, and this is a really uncomfortable situation. Everybody's sitting on the bus not looking, not helping, and he's abusing her. Now, I don't want to say this is maybe setting the scene for what could happen in Quebec if the Charter of Values happens, but do you think that even having the discussion is kind of dredging up feelings that people have got used to actually not even voicing?
I don't know. There are incidents of that nature from time to time where there's hostility between people. I can't see that it's caused by this Charter of Values. There is a lot of emotion in the air for sure, as you've seen already, among people who differ in opinion. But I mean, the issue here is secularism. That's what we want to. That's what we need to institute. And the Quebec government really should be congratulated for having the courage to put this forward, although it is flawed in several ways. And I think that other provinces should do similar things of implementing church-state separation. It's something that needs to be done in all jurisdictions.
Okay.
Well, Fariha, before you answer Femi's question, someone on Twitter already did. And so, Fariha, I want your thoughts on this. We actually got this tweet from Asia, and she writes in, I lived in Quebec for over a decade, and I never witnessed anyone harass Muslims without being provoked. Charter stirred hatred. Fariha?
This legislation's stirring up all sorts of prejudice. I have, on a daily basis in the last several days, there's been a woman in Quebec City, Badia Zanucci, who was spat on in a mall and told to choose a different religion. There is the instance of this video. There's someone I know personally who was screamed at by an employee of a coffee shop and told to get out of her country or the government will make her. And this is frightening. I mean, this is unacceptable.
In fact, in the incident in Quebec City, the woman who insulted and spat on the woman wearing the hijab said, Madame Marois will get you to take your hijab off. So there definitely was a connection with the Charter of Values. I appreciate David sort of not noticing any of these things. He's also not noticing that there are many, many crosses across many public buildings in Quebec. It's true they're not controversial, but they're there. They're described as part of our historic heritage, so they get an opt-out automatically because that's what the proposal, not law, suggests.
And Jack, just to add to that, I mean, essentially, I want to hear from Michelle. How can a government remain secular yet remain closed on Christmas Day, on Good Friday, on Easter Monday?
Michelle,
is that secularism?
Of course, those are national holidays. The same in France.
National holidays, why?
Christmas is Christmas, and it's it's a national holiday. And
why not Yom Kippur?
It's a celebration of the winter solstice.
Every country in the world have national holidays, and it comes from long traditions. Yeah, before the Christians, there were the Romans, and the solstice and the equinox are
is that Good Friday as well, and Easter Monday?
Well, Easter does correspond.
It comes from. It's a false issue.
It's a false issue, not in my Quebec.
Let me interject here because I think we're going round in circles. So Michelle, I'm just going to interject here if I may. You're sort of squirming a little bit. I want to show you a picture of Jason Kenney's Twitter page. And Jason Kenney is the multiculturalism minister for Canada, and he's wearing a Sikh headdress here, so you know where he stands on this issue. We talked about this charter as being a proposal. Jack, do you think this actually might go?
Yes. It's not a law yet. It won't become law actually because the government is in a minority situation. And actually, when David says it's about courage, it's actually about a narrow political calculation, minority government desperately trying to find an issue that will appeal to the identity and anxiety of a segment of Quebecers. It's having an effect in that regard, as we're seeing from a lot of media comment. The media comment is often rather ugly, by the way. So to the same extent that David and Michelle refer to English Canada as engaging in some ugly Quebec bashing, and I don't deny that there is that, there's also been a lot of ugly racist comment in social media in Quebec, as well as on the radio stations, directed at Muslims and other minority religious communities.
I can attest
I
to
would
that.
appreciate if David and Michelle would acknowledge that. It would be at least better for them to do that than to squarely try to say that this is all about English Canada bashing or anti-Quebec bashing, and that's what explains the hostility to it. The hostility to it is the concern a lot of people have about its violation of various fundamental rights in our Quebec Charter, in our Canadian Charter, and in various international conventions.
Just very
In the
quick.
United States, this thing would never pass the muster. In fact, people who know about this in the United States, I'm sure will get a laugh out of it. They'll think it's fiction.
So David and Michelle, just very quickly, do you even take that point that Jack made?
Well,
David, go on.
You can't blame the charter for people who commit acts of aggression.
Why not? It's a message.
political
You're
program.
blaming. You're suggesting religious symbols are conveying messages. Why don't
It's
you think
been
the charter?
it's been
That is
deliberately
exactly what's
misinterpreted.
happening right now.
All right. So Jack, they're not agreeing with me. We're going to move on and bring the community in here.
Well, there's actually a video comment I want to play because it goes in line with what Jack was just saying. All of our guests, if you could have a listen to this.
I'm opposed to Quebec's Charter of Values because it is divisive, demeaning, and destructive. It is destructive because a good democracy is based not just on the rule of a majority, but also on protecting the rights of a minority. It is demeaning because it treats practicing Jews and Muslims as fanatics who will destroy society. And it is divisive because it is causing debate, and not even worse than that, it is actually stirring up prejudice amongst the population.
So that video comment is from a rabbi in Montreal, but I want to talk about moving forward. Jack, we got this Facebook comment from Justin, who's skeptical. He says, as a Quebecer, let me tell you that this will never pass, so don't worry. We have a new sheriff in town. She'll soon be gone. The cycle will just continue without the PQ ever making progress. Welcome to Quebec. Is that what we have to look forward to?
That very well may be true, but it doesn't diminish from the need to try to address this thing. It's a very crudely calculated political effort to get votes on the basis of people's fears and anxieties. And whenever you do try to have a conversation about this, which I'm surprised David and Michelle don't notice, usually what comes out of it, when I talk to people I otherwise think are reasonable amongst many of my colleagues, this is not amongst Francophones only, it's amongst non-Francophones as well, is spewing various racist epithets about Muslims or Jews or others. So obviously, you know, this charter is giving rise to a lot of prejudice, as you know, as many of your contributors here through your network have observed.
All right. So
The greatest prejudice that is being stirred up by this debate is the prejudice against Quebecers.
all right. So I am going to
Yeah, I mean, that's
I am
a
going to
very
call
convenient
timeout
thing that
for
people
the
say that's
moment,
unjustified.
everybody.
It's
So
like we're
Michelle,
being
David, Jack, Fariha, I'm going to call timeout because this is a conversation that is passionate and almost endless. I feel that. But what I wanted to ask you one by one, and to be very brief, is from your perspective, how do you resolve this debate, this discussion? But briefly, and I ask all of our guests to respect each other and not to talk over them, because I really want to hear each of your points. But again, I will emphasize briefly. Michelle, how do we get out of this?
Well, simply by looking seriously at what is proposed. What is proposed is a very reasonable piece of legislation. And, you know, it's against no one in particular. It's for the freedom of thoughts. It's for the future of our children, not to be indoctrinated. It's about bringing people together. In fact, you know, if you look at the public servants, the unions is for this project, and many people are for this project. It's reasonable.
Okay, it's nice to hear Michelle with nobody else butting in. We will do exactly the same for David. David, how do we resolve this very heated debate?
We get to the central issue, which is secularism, which is church-state separation, which is what we want to do. It's got nothing to do with race. It's got nothing to do with other parts of the PQ program. It's about secularism. That's why I support it. That's why most people support it, because it has to do with keeping religion and government separate for the betterment of everybody in society. and
Right.
that's the issue.
Okay, thank you. Jack, what's your resolution for this debate?
That the opposition parties defeat the legislation if it's ever when it's proposed, and that we go back to the drawing board, have a more reasonable discussion. There are some issues we need to work out with respect to the separation of religion and state, but clearly not on the basis of something that's so unreasonable. This is one of the most unreasonable proposals I've seen since my birth in this province.
Oh my goodness, it's so refreshing hearing everybody, just that single voice. One more time, Fariha. What's your resolution to this mess?
Well, Femi, I'd love to respond to Michelle directly that there's nothing reasonable about this legislation. It's absolutely ludicrous. Let's talk about our children for a second. How do we tell the children of religious minorities that they can and cannot go into certain professions because of their faith? That the Canadian government sanctions in the Charter of Rights and Responsibilities?
I want to thank all of our guests. I want to thank Michelle Lincourt, also David Rand, Jacques Jedwab and Fariha Nakvi Mohammed for bringing your passion, for helping us to understand this debate even better. Malika, I can tell that look in your eye. You always have something else going on.
There's one last one.
Go on.
It kind of sums this up. Mulenga on Facebook, says, what really causes divisions? Is it a person pasted with an array of religious symbolism that instantly shows that they're not like the rest of us in society? Or is it those people who are denying people this right to be different? Cheeky.
I like that.
Me too.
I need to lie down after today's program. I'm taking a couple of days off.
We'll miss you. The show won't be the same.
The show won't be the same. It will be different because Malika Bilal is hosting next week.
It's true.
What's the plan?
I'm looking forward to it. On Monday, we're talking about Iran. Are Iran's hardline policies starting to ease under President Hassan Rouhani? We'll discuss why Iranian authorities unexpectedly freed 11 of its most prominent political prisoners. But in the meantime, we'll see you online.